All right, hello everyone. So let's get started. This is the very beginning of this startup. And all I have right now is the idea. And I have a little bit of validation. I was on Twitter the other day, and this is sort of what gave me the spark and the inspiration to start this. I was following Paul Graham, and I saw him comment on a thread of another tweet talking about the need for this. And what was interesting to me about this was that I also had this idea since a couple of years ago. This is something that I've run into over and over again when reading articles online. I get hit with a paywall. And so then I turn away, right? Because I don't want to buy a subscription to just one publication. In, the modern day, we have, our news sources from all sorts of different publications. There's the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, there's the Washington Post, and it's all websites, right? And no one's really subscribing to papers anymore. I wish we were, but we're just not. That's just not that time anymore. We can get free articles off of CNN, Fox News, things like that, who rely really heavily on advertising. But the more traditional, old school publications have adapted and evolved to, suit modern times with the internet. And so they have their articles up on their websites, and they'll allow you to read their articles for, maybe 4 or 5 times. They count every time you visit through your browser, they detect it through IP and through cookies. And then all of a sudden they hit you with a paywall. And you have to pay they give you some kind of intro deal where it's $1 a week for 6 weeks, and then finally it's $10 a month or who knows what. It ends up being anywhere between $50 to $150, $200 a year, and that's just articles on that one site. Well, that's not how the modern day and age works, right? We get our news from several different sites, so we want a slice from several different pies, not just one pie. And, we're getting our news curated to us through social media, right? That's how I do it, right? I go on Twitter, my Twitter feed or my Facebook feed. There's an article that's, posted by someone, and it's some, maybe bombshell or, some kind of breaking, news article. And usually it's those publications that are the ones at the forefront that are releasing these things, right? So you click on it and then you get hit with the paywall. And so then, for me, I don't pay because I know eventually I'm going to hear about it, right? Either through Twitter or, CNN will eventually pick it up. But in that moment, I really want to know about it. I want to read it. The headline is very enticing, and, what it promises to tell me is also very enticing. And I would do anything just to pay for that one article. Well, anyway, that's what this idea is about. So I've whiteboarded it. And, to finish my story about the Twitter feed with Paul Graham, he said that he has been waiting to fund something like this for, as long as he can remember, and he even pitched it to the Airbnb guys, when they came to him with their idea that he didn't really believe in at first, but then he, eventually, like the rest is history, he believed in it, funded it, and, now they're, everywhere. So anyway, when I saw that, and I thought, this was an idea that I had too, that made me realize there's something to this, there's some viability to this, so let's try it out. And with my experience building startups now, and I've built several of these products. None of them have been a hit yet, so still waiting for that. But I've learned a lot along the way. And, I've learned also from hearing from people who have been there and who have had hits and who have seen people have a lot of hits, like Paul Graham, or like, Altman, or, one of those guys out in Silicon, or Jason Calacanis, who has a great podcast, This Week in Startups. I recommend you guys watch that. Check that out. Really interesting stuff. What they've seen, and, they've been there, they've done that, so they know what it takes. And I, weigh what they have to say very heavily. And, who knows, right? It's like there's no set recipe. Everyone has to follow their own path. You can read a ton of books, and you can listen to what everyone has to say and follow all these recipes, and it still won't work. And why doesn't it work? Well, because life is different for everybody. And so in the end, I think you can use those things as guides, including this video. But you might have to, forge your own path and try different things that maybe people have never tried before, including me. So here we go. I've whiteboarded it out. And this is very high level, right? Because this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the idea. So we're going to start high level, and then we're going to drill down from there. But this is going to help me to kind of visualize everything that I need. And like I said before, we need to start super simple with an MVP, a minimally viable product so that we can execute this as quickly as possible. Eventually, this will have a lot more bells and whistles and a lot more features, and there's going to be a lot more obstacles to hurdle. But in the beginning, we want the core essence of what this needs to be in order for it to work, right? So I've identified just a few things here. So I have what the features are and the UX, user experience. I have the functionality, and then I have the backend. So I've laid it all out, and what I determined from this is I'm going to need to start with a website that's going to be both user-facing and client-facing. My users are going to be the people that are going to subscribe to this service, and the clients are going to be the publications. As far as functionality is concerned, I'm going to make this super simple. Well, relatively speaking. It's going to be an API, and the API means that the newspapers can take this, plug this into their site, and allow subscribers to access it through all the different sites in order to pay for articles. So I need to build the API, and for that, I'm going to need to host it in the back end. So I have my host. We're going to use AWS. We're going to do it in a LAMP stack, which is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. That's just to start. That's how Facebook got started, was on a LAMP stack. Obviously, they're using a lot of different technology now, I'm sure, but we're going to start with that. And this is like really, tried and true stuff here, right? There's new stuff. There's Node.js and things like that now where you don't even need, like a web server, things like that. But, we're doing it more traditionally this time, also because it's the thing that I'm most familiar with. I have SSL, right, because we want it to be secure. Like I said, this is super high level. Beanstalk I have here with a question mark. That's a service with AWS where everything is sort of modular, and that way there's failover and high availability, and it can scale as you grow. I don't think we need that right now because this is just the beginning, and we need to get this out to the users. And what I'm assuming right now is probably wrong anyway. That's how it works. But we're going to go with our best assumptions for right now. Encryption, obviously, for passwords, because people are going to be providing a username, a password, and their credit card information. We're going to use Stripe in the back end to facilitate financial transactions so that they can purchase articles. And also what I have here needed, publication partners. So I think it's going to be really valuable and important for me to reach out to publications even before I build this, to try to see if I can talk to them and find out what they want out of this, right? I need to understand the client. Locally here in Orange County, there's the OC Register, who, has been here forever, right? I remember when I was a kid, their newspapers on everyone's driveway. They had the iconic building in Santa Ana that you can see from the 5 freeway, that says OC Register. Now it's vacant with a big for sale sign. It's super sad, but they're still around. They're still selling papers, and they're mostly online, and I'm sure they rely heavily on advertising, but they've really downsized, obviously, and that's the case for publications all across this country. So we're in a time right now where, sort of like how the music industry was in the late 90s, early 2000s, where their content was being shared in a way that doesn't allow them to monetize it as well anymore. So we need to figure out a new way. So I kind of see this idea as the iTunes for publications, where iTunes came in, Steve Jobs introduced it in 2003, and sort of convinced everyone, right, with the way that he does in his reality distortion field, but in this case it turned out to be actual reality, that for the users, you can buy songs and not have to rip them through Napster or, whatever that thing was called, right? WinMP, or I forget what it was called. You pay $1 a song, right? And he convinced all the music companies too that you can sell your content digitally. You don't have to just spend your time selling CDs and going after the Napsters and the, other sites out there that allow people to rip songs and, file lawsuits everywhere and spend all your time and energy doing that, which is all really negative and no one liked that. You can make money. It's going to be a transition, but, everyone got on board, and then it was smooth sailing from there for the most part, right? Now we've evolved even more to a subscription model, which I think is probably where things are settling here with the internet. That's how everyone likes it. It takes a while for people to get used to a new way of doing things, especially in media. People were used to owning their music, and iTunes was a transition, right? They still could own it, but it was digital. The music companies were happy with it for the most part because they were making money, and the users were happy with it because they can download their songs. But it was one song. It wasn't whole records. You know, they would buy one song for $1, another song for $1. Well, this is sort of a similar concept, but for articles. So anyway, I want to talk to the publications. I'm going to try to reach out to the OC Register, see who I can talk to there and get their feedback. And in return, I'm going to offer to, build some things, for them. What do they want to see, right? What kind of metrics do they want to see? What kind of stats maybe from their readership, as they start to use this product. So that'll be, how I'm going to entice them to use this. And if I can partner with one of them, then I think that that'll help me to enter into this world, learn a lot about it, and then take that information, get that feedback, and hopefully then convert it into useful information and data that I could then go and pitch to other publications and move on from there. And also, gain usership in the beginning too. So, I'm going to partner with publications. Sounds easier than it actually is, I'm sure. Find interested parties, like I said. Approach local publications and research barriers. What are the barriers? Why doesn't this exist already? In that Twitter feed that Paul Graham was commenting on, it was full of people talking about, yeah, why doesn't this exist already? And everyone's throwing out their thoughts about it, and everyone's saying this would be great if it existed. So that to me is a sign that it's going to exist. But there are some barriers. And I don't know exactly what that would be, because it would sound like, well, why wouldn't the publications just agree to this, right? They can make so much more money. Imagine, some breaking news article that just gets released. The word spreads about that stuff virally in an instant. You can have 1 million people reading that article within an hour. And every one of them paying per, article. That could be pretty lucrative, right? So why aren't they doing this already? This needs to be something, too, that people can use everywhere, right? That they could use the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Washington Post, LA Times, right? So it needs to be single sign-on. I think that that's the key. Washington Post or New York Times, of course, they have the resources to build this themselves, but why would they do that when that's only for their pie? And with the way people read and consume news articles these days, they want a slice of several different pies. So that's the other thing. Maybe that's what it is. We have to convince them, kind of like Steve Jobs did with the music industry. We have to twist their arms, and hopefully we can do that by pioneering, finding some pioneering publication first to do this with us, so that we can then have show proof, right? Proof in the pudding that this thing works. Kind of introduce the concept and get them to buy into it. Steve Jobs did the same thing. I reference Steve Jobs a lot, right? Why not? He's a good one to kind of refer to in these things as inspiration. But, he got AT&T on board when all the other cell phone companies didn't want to, at the time, do the iPhone because they wouldn't have control over how the hardware looked. They wanted their logo right on the hardware. Remember back in the old days, 2006, 2005, the old Palm Trios and the Razors and things like that. They had the, Verizon logo on it. You had to have Verizon software on there. And, it was a mess. And Steve Jobs didn't want that, obviously, because he wanted to control the whole experience. He had a vision, and AT&T was the only one that agreed to it. Of course, that, that they would be exclusive for a while. And it ended up working, and they were able to show the world that that was the way to go. Anyway, that's kind of big vision. So, but that's how you start, big vision, whiteboard it out, flesh it out. So what to start with? Feature UX, let's see here. We're gonna create the button. So I'm gonna start with that. I'm gonna start with the technology. First, we have to build the back end. We're gonna do the servers. I'm probably just gonna do one server right now. Let's see here. We're gonna build the API, and then we're gonna build the user experience, the interface, in that order. All right, so the next video, we'll dive into that.